isometric sketch. It's basically just the same as counting the number of blocks and duplicating it onto your isometric paper. So I'm going to start with this bottom corner here, and I'm just going to make a little mark on my paper that matches up with this bottom starting point. So when I count in the width direction, I've got 1, 2, 3 in the width. So I'm going to duplicate that by moving 1, 2, 3 in the width. That leaves me off to here. I'm going to go ahead and complete this portion of the front face by going 1, 2, 3, 4 in the vertical direction, which is our height. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, this is all freehand. You don't need a straight edge for it. Completing the front face is going to require moving 3 in the width direction, and the opposite direction is what we started at. And then we're going to move 1, 2, 3, 4 back down to complete that front outline. There is a hole in here, so let's go ahead and duplicate that. Starting at your bottom left corner, right 1 and up 1, 2. So right 1 and up 1, 2. And it's just a square right in here. And you're going to basically duplicate that same diagonal piece that goes through to show that the edge continues. Let's go ahead and do this right facing side. It has a depth of 2 and a height of 4. So where we left off, depth of 2, height of 4. Connect the piece. For this front facing piece, it has a width of 2 and a height of 4. Back over to here, width of 2, 1, 2, and the height of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, back 2 gets us to connect to where we left off. We have a depth of 1 on this right face here. Depth of 1 and a height of 4 again. And so we'll just connect that, and that completes this right face. Leaving off here, we're going to go backwards in the width direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is right there. And just do your best to try and make it as straight as you can. But again, it's freehand, so these are just sketches. If we want it perfect, we'll CAD it. And then connect the top piece. And that concludes recreating the isometric sketch. In order to create our multi-view from our isometric view, we need to remember the layout of our paper. This isometric and orthographic paper is really nice because it has this diagonally lined isometric paper in the top right of my page, and the rest of the page is the orthographic, basically your normal grid lines that you're used to seeing in a math class. And we're going to go ahead and start with the front view because I think the front view is easiest to work with. So the front view goes down on the bottom left-hand corner of the page. I'm going to start with this particular coordinate point here, and a reminder that the front view matches up your width, which is this direction, and your height. So front view is width and height. All right, so starting at this location right here, I'm going to give myself enough room, and I'm going to make a point right about here. And from that point, I need to move 1, 2, 3 in the width direction. 1, 2, 3. From that location, I'm going to move 1, 2, 3, 4 in the vertical height direction. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I know it's a rectangle, so I'm going to go ahead and come back to complete that front face. There is this hole that we need to account for, and that is located from this corner right 1 and up 2, right 1, up 2, and that's the bottom of that square. Now that only takes care of this particular front face. If I look at this bottom corner of the front face, that matches up with this bottom corner of the front face. I'm going to move back in the depth direction, and I'm going to hit this corner of this particular front face. Okay, so this corner, because it's on the same line as this coordinate point, it's just back in the depth. Depth is not drawn on the front view. So I'm going to stay at the same location on my width axis, and that's where I'm going to start that coordinate point for this front face. So I'm going to move over a dimension of 1, 2 in the width from where I left off. 1, 2 has a height of 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it comes back over a value of 2. Now, if you're standing in the front and you're looking at this, this vertical line represents this edge. And this edge is showing that there's something changing in the depth from this front face to this front face. So our front view has that vertical edge. It also has the hole. All right, next let's go ahead and take a look at the top view. I'm going to start with this coordinate point here. That matches up with this coordinate point on the front face. Okay, they share this common edge. That being said, you have to match your grid lines. I left off here, so I'm going to follow this exact same grid line all the way up. And I'm just going to make a coordinate point. That coordinate point is the starting for our top view. Top view is a dimension of width versus depth. Okay, so let's move the width first. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And now I'm going to move back a dimension in the depth dimension for 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Move my paper down just a little bit. And now we're going to move over right. 1, 2. Okay, that's the width. 1, 2. One more further in the depth direction. And coming back across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then that would connect to our starting point. Now, this is your top view. The orientation matters. This shape, which kind of looks like a pot that you might cook with, should look like a pot here as well, with this kind of handle off to the right-hand side. Something to note, if I follow this grid line down, this little edge here, you will notice, matches up with this dimension here. Okay? All of these things line up. This one lines up coming down to this guy. So all of those line up. As far as the top view goes, if you were hovering above this thing looking downwards, there's a feature that you do not see, and that feature is this hole that extends through the part. In order to account for that, we have to do some dashed lines. The easiest way is to look at your front view and to notice that the hole right here matches up with this grid line. So I'm going to follow this grid line, and I'm just going to extend it. And here's the other edge of that hole. Okay, that top view, there's a hole that extends through using this area. So by drawing your vertical dashed lines on your top view, you're showing that there's a hole that extends the depth of this part, right? Width versus depth. All right. So that's our top view. And now finally we're going to do our right-hand view. And the right-facing view is any face of this part that is the depth versus the height. So that's this face, and that's this little face in here. Okay, I'm using the vertical lines and the diagonals that go backwards, basically. So for my right-facing view, I'm going to make sure that I line up so that the bottom edge of my front matches the bottom of my right. This coordinate point right here is where my bottom edge of the right face meets the bottom edge of my front face. So this coordinate point is this one on the front view, and it's going to be this starting point on the right-facing view. 1, 2 in the depth dimension. 1, 2, 3, 4 in my height dimension. And again, everything should line up on the grid lines. You'll notice that the top edge of my right face matches the top edge of my front face. It's because it's the same height. Right, so that's this right face. If I move in the width direction, that brings me to this coordinate point. Because they are on the same width line, it actually connects at the same point as my other front, or as my other right face. So I'm going to move 1 tick mark in the depth dimension, 4 tick marks up, 1, 2, 3, 4, back over, and that completes my right-facing view as far as the faces go. If you were on the right side facing, you would not see this hole, but there is a hole that extends through that part. Just like before when I basically used the grid lines to help me with my top view, I'm going to use the grid lines to help me with my right view. Follow that hole on the grid line, and it goes through the part. Follow that whole grid line, and it goes through the part. The thing that needs to happen on this sketch is we need to account for the fact that the light source is in the back. And if you remember me saying earlier, the easiest way to start dealing with any kind of shading or cross-hatching is to go to the opposite face as the light source. So if the light source is from the back, let's go to the front. And that is where any cross-hatching would be. And students have asked me, does it matter how many lines, or does it matter, how spaced they are? And the answer is no. Just put it in so that it is very obvious that it is cross-hatched. Okay, that's one front face. The other front face is right here. Okay, so again, the opposite side of the light source is where you get your cross-hatching, and everything else is going to get a single. Okay, if we were able to view the back side, that would have no hatching at all. It wouldn't have any shading. All right, and a couple of students have asked, what do you do with the inside? And my answer to that is just, we're not dealing with any darkening because of its shadow inside of a hole, and just do it the same way you would do the other faces. So this is, in this little area, this was a right face, so it gets a single hatch, and this one was a top face, so it gets a single hatch. Okay, and that concludes the video for isometric to multi-view sketching.